Afternoon. My name is Dr. Ollie Jones. I'm the co-president of the Ohio Grandparent Kinship Care Coalition. I'll be moderating this session today. So welcome to this awesome informational segment that you're going to be participating in. I want to not behold the time. We will give each speaker a 30 minutes to present and then leave the other half hour for questions and answers. I'm going to encourage you to put your questions in the chat box and then they will be monitored so that they can be answered promptly. I want to first introduce to you someone who I think is very well versed in the area of kinship care and all that's going on with it right now, and that is Will Petrick. Will is with budget is a budget researcher, Policy Matters Ohio. He is going to be talking this afternoon on kinship and the state budget, which is very controversial right now. So at this time, I'm going to let him come, and after him will be Emily Jackson will come, caregiver program administrator, Ohio Department of Aging will follow behind him. Without further delay, I'm going to turn you over to Will.
Thank you. And so I'm just going to share my screen. Are folks seeing that first slide? Great.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Ollie Jones, and thanks to Ron and Barb to all of you for hosting this, and thanks to everyone for joining today for your interest in this issue. Again, my name is Will Petrick. I'm with Policy Matters Ohio. Our organization's mission is to build a more equitable, inclusive, sustainable, and thriving state. And I think I want to start with this African proverb. It takes a village to raise a child. I think it's just really critical as we think about our priorities as a state. The state budget is really a reflection of our values and kind of a roadmap for the future of our communities and the future of our state. And we know that families have changed throughout history. And as our society continues to move forward, there continues to be all sorts of different definitions of, what does family look like? And we know, particularly with the pandemic and the recession, families have just faced enormous challenges over this last year. Parents, grandparents, caregivers, I think anyone who's been in that situation knows we can't do it alone. So we all play a part in, really creating this village to support families and to support the health and development and just stability of kids. So, today, like Dr. Jones said, I'm planning to focus primarily on how the state budget can do a lot more to support kinship caregivers and kinship families. And just in terms of an overview of what I plan to present, before getting into the details of what's in the state budget and what's in the federal stimulus package that was passed a little less than 2 weeks ago, I'm going to provide a little context for just how does the state currently support kinship families, kids in kinship families. And then after that, I'll get more into what are the investments in kinship care in the state budget. Also plan to provide kind of a high level overview of the American Rescue Plan, which was again passed just a little less than 2 weeks ago. There's some really meaningful elements of that can help provide caregivers and kinship families and provide some relief. So want to touch on those points as well. So again, I think it's important to just start, even before jumping into this, with a little bit about me. So I got into this work for two main reasons. One is, I believe that everyone, regardless of what we look like, where we live, how much money we make, we all deserve basic human dignity. All kids and families need stability and security. And I also came to this work. So I graduated from undergrad in 2009. So it was right after the 2008 presidential election. where Obama got elected on this message of hope and change, and like we can shape our society and we can make a difference. And so I also come into this work because I believe in organizing, right? This like idea of like a small group of people can make change in our communities and in our state. So that's a little bit about just my motivations. But again, as we think about issues in the state of Ohio, you know, all families need security and stability. All children need love, support, and a stable environment to learn and grow. And we all need to be able to put food on the table. We all need to be able to pay the rent and just, you know, pay for the basics to support ourselves and our families. And, you know, when I think about kinship care, part of what I think about is the situation that kids are in when they are potentially separating from their biological parents. That can be a traumatic moment and a traumatic time. And it's so critical to have a family member, a grandparent, an aunt or an uncle, someone who's trusted by the child to step in and say, I can care for you. And the research really shows that kids do better when they are placed with family members, whether that be grandparents or family friends, instead of placed in foster care with a non-relative. Part of this is because it's really important for kids to stay connected to someone that they know and trust. We also know that kinship care helps kids maintain their identity and stay connected to their family and their support network. The research also shows that within kids in the child welfare system, kids who are placed with kin do better in terms of behavioral and mental health outcomes. And they're also better able to adjust to their new living environment and less likely to experience behavioral challenges at school. And that's as compared to kids who are placed in non-relative foster care. Another, I think, important context, just thinking about the state of Ohio and the increasing need is the opiate epidemic. So this is driving more and more kids into Ohio's child welfare system. And as that happens, you know, it's really up to both all of us, but also state lawmakers to make sure that, you know, relatives and kinship caregivers have the resources, have the support to step in and be able to provide that caring, nurturing environment. So this slide really highlights the increase of kids in the child welfare system. And again, these are kids who have been removed from their home and who have been placed in custody with a county public children's service agency. So we know there's tens of thousands of more children who are in informal kinship care settings, but these are specifically what we call formal placements. And so you can see, like, from 2020 compared to 2012, the number of kids placed with kin grew from just under 2,000 to just a little over 4,500. So that's over 100% increase just over those 8 years. We also broadly, for the whole child welfare system, saw that there were over 16,500 kids in out-of-home placements in 2020, and that's a 34% increase since 2012. You know, this next slide really highlights some of the racial inequities within the child welfare system. You know, we know that most people within the child welfare system have positive intentions, like everyone's trying to do their best to support kids and again, provide stability and security. And we know that there is structural racism in our society and even within the child welfare system. And that means that more Black children are more likely to be removed from their parents than white children. And it also means that there's an overrepresentation of Black children in the foster care system as compared to the general Black child population. And there's also an underrepresentation of white children in the foster care system as compared to the overall population of white children. I think it's important to provide context for this too. So there's a couple of things that are important. One is, again, there's been a history of policies that have excluded Black and brown families from opportunity and support. So this is, less access to financing and housing opportunities, less access to educational opportunities. There's also structural racism within the criminal justice system, and also just through jobs that pay low wages. Studies have also found racial bias among people who report children to the child welfare system. So this could be teachers or child welfare workers, but that's another important point. So this next slide is really, I think, a key point in this presentation. So this really highlights how kids and kinship caregivers are treated inequitably and unfairly by the state of Ohio. So, as you can see, the first column is monthly support for approved kin caregivers. And the columns on the right side are the monthly payment to foster care providers. So as you can see, kinship caregivers get a fraction of support that licensed foster care providers receive. And so, this slide highlights the OWF child-only payments. That's the TANF cash assistance. And so if you're, say, a relative caring for your granddaughter, you'll receive $302 a month through the current system. And for comparison, a licensed foster care parent, say in Scioto County, the minimum amount that parent would receive or that caregiver would receive is $836 a month. The maximum is over $4,000 a month to provide care for the child. So there's huge inequities in terms of like how the state is supporting kin caregivers and how the state is supporting foster care providers. And even within this, there's also structural racism. So Black children within the child welfare system are more likely than white children to be placed with kin and placed with kinship caregivers. And, this shows that, one, kinship caregivers are offered fewer resources. The research also shows that kin caregivers are offered fewer training and support and other types of resources from child welfare agencies as compared to foster care providers. So, for us at Policy Matters, we believe that children, no matter their race, no matter where they live, they shouldn't be penalized for being placed with a relative. So, that was the context, this inequity within the system. And there have now been 2 court cases. The first was DO versus Glisson. So this court case was supposed to change all of this. Basically in 2017, there was a ruling that basically confirmed that approved relative caregivers, so approved kinship caregivers, have a right to the same foster care maintenance payments as compared to children who are placed with licensed foster care providers. And so that was ruling in 2017, and this was within the Sixth Circuit Court. And so that this was a court case in Kentucky, but that Sixth Circuit applies to Ohio, Kentucky, Michigan, and Tennessee. So after that ruling, Ohio is basically in violation of what was federal law. And, we were providing these inequitable payments and support, whether a child was placed with kin versus whether a child was placed with a foster family. We remain in violation of that. And what happened just recently was the state was actually sued just this last November because there was no action. There was a new suit that was brought to the state, And that case is still in the courts. And so what happened after, so that was in November of last year. And while the state didn't respond to GLSEN, they did respond pretty quickly to this other lawsuit. So state lawmakers and the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, during the lame duck session in December, they responded by including an amendment to Senate Bill 310, which was the capital budget. But this amendment essentially created what's called the Kinship Support Program. And I think one process piece that's important to note is on the day that this amendment was introduced, the same day, the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services briefed the County Commissioners Association, the Public Children's Service Association of the state of Ohio, and the State Association of the Job and Family Service Directors. My understanding is those organizations didn't get a chance to provide feedback. It was really like, here's the plan, here's the program, here's what we're doing. And again, they were briefed the same day it was introduced. I also just wanted to ask, among this community and this organization, did any of you get, I guess, have an opportunity to provide input on this new program before it was introduced? And if you want to respond in the chat, feel free to do so. It looks like I got a couple no's. So again, my understanding on this is, you know, this was a very rushed process, and so many people didn't have a chance to weigh in on this new program and on this new legislation. We feel like that's really problematic. Policy ought to be a collaborative process, particularly with people who are going to be most directly impacted by it. So, you know, children and kinship families and kinship caregivers ought to have a say in what is this program actually going to look like. And a lot of these organizations and people just didn't get that opportunity to provide input. So, you know, one thing that happened as a result of that is, you know, there's this new kinship support program. It's still unfair. It's still inequitable. So like the existing system, again, it's not providing the same level of support as licensed foster care providers are receiving. So the new program will provide roughly $310 per month. So this is, you know, basically an additional $8 a month compared to the TANF child-only payment. It is more if you have 2 kids in your care, so it's an additional $208 a month for if you have 2 children. Another challenge with this program is it's time limited. So at the start of this program, basically kinship caregivers can participate in the program for 9 months. That will later be reduced to 6 months. But the state hopes that kinship caregivers will use this limit of time, these 6 months or 9 months, to get licensed to become, you know, licensed foster parents under licensing standards. And then, you know, these kinship caregivers will be eligible to receive the higher payment. We've heard from a lot of kinship caregivers and a lot of even job and family service directors that, you know, many kinship families just aren't interested in that. And aren't interested in getting licensed as foster care providers. So, you know, there's certainly a lot of questions and concerns about this new kinship support program, but I hope all of that provides some helpful context. So all of that being said, what's in the governor's proposed budget? And I think it's also important to note that the budget is a process. So the first draft, the governor and his team get to kind of lay out the proposal. And then it goes through the House and it goes through the Senate, and there's finance committees and subcommittees. And basically it's in the House right now. So we as residents of the state of Ohio have an opportunity to testify and to try to shape, what the budget priorities will be. This process will go through the end of June, and it has to be signed into law by the end of June. So what is in the governor's proposed budget? First, in terms of like programs that were maintained from the last 2-year budget. First, the Ohio Kinship and Adoption Navigator Program. So that was something that was launched last year. That's been maintained at $8.5 million each year. And this is a program to help kinship caregivers and adoptive families who might be struggling. The idea is they can call a navigator and be pointed toward resources that are available, services that are available, and how to access those. There's also a program that's been maintained called 30 Days to Family at $400,000 each year. That's a program that's being used in many of the county children's service agencies and helps child welfare agencies identify kin as soon as children come into their custody. And the idea is that this will help prevent kids from being placed in foster care. The Kinship Permanency Incentive Program is another thing that's been maintained in the budget at $1 million in GRF each year. And this is something that offers resources to help defray the costs. So say you're a grandparent, this is very unexpected, but you get asked to care for your grandkids. The Kinship Permanency Incentive Program provides resources and support to defray some of those costs. This is specifically something that is available for kin with legal custody or legal guardianship. So that's one of the important things to note is the Kinship Support Program is a specific program for kids who are still in the custody of the Child Welfare Agency, whereas the Kinship Permanency Incentive Program is something that can help support kin who have legal custody of the child or legal guardianship. Some new programs in the budget. One is the Kinship Guardianship Assistance Program. This is something, there's $2.5 million allocated for the second year of the biennium. And this will help children move into permanency. So again, this is not for children who are in the custody of the Child Welfare Agency. And this allows the state to draw down federal support, draw down Title IV dollars, and provide some state matching support for kinship caregivers who become legal guardians or who take permanent custody. The Kinship Support Program, that was the new program that was just established in the lame ducks. So that was the one that we just mentioned. Again, this was developed in response to the lawsuit, and like the existing system is unfair and inequitable. Again, it still provides kids and kinship caregivers a fraction of the support that foster care providers receive. It's time limited. And it also makes this assumption that kin want to get licensed as foster care providers. A couple new policies. The Kinship Guardianship Assistance is a new state policy. There's also a resource family bill of rights. So the state defines a resource family as a foster home or a kinship caregiver family. And so the State Department, ODJFS, the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, will adopt rules to establish and enforce the Resource Family Bill of Rights. They're also adopting rules to establish a Foster Youth Bill of Rights. One item that is really unfortunate news is the budget eliminates what's called the Kinship Caregiver Program. This was something in the TANF budget that really provided stabilization funds and services. This could be one-time expenses like cribs or beds for kids, or even like school clothing, different things like that, that would be a one-time stabilization and support for kids. This program also, it was something that was available to all kinship caregivers. So regardless of status, whether it was a kinship caregiver who had a child in the custody of the child welfare agency or not, these stabilization services were available to kinship caregivers, basically everyone at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. So this again was $15 million each year. The current proposed budget eliminates that within the TANF budget. One of our partners, PCSAO, is working to get an amendment in the budget to try to get this back into the House budget. So that's something that if you're talking to lawmakers, if you're talking with leaders in your community, to lift up, and help educate people about this program and why it's so important to kinship caregivers. So this slide, I just wanted to include it because there are so many different definitions that the state kind of views kinship caregivers differently depending on your situation. So they call someone an approved kinship caregiver if the child is in the custody of the state or the child welfare agency. So this is a child and a family that's been through like a county court process, and the court has basically placed the child in PCSA custody. And then that county child welfare agency places the child with a kin or with a relative. And so that column, the one where there's roughly 4,500 children, that specific group of kinship caregivers is eligible for the kinship support program. And that is also the specific group of kinship caregivers who would be impacted by the Glisson decision. And the next column, the kin with legal custody or kin with legal guardianship, these are kinship caregivers who can access the OWF child-only payment. They can access the kinship permanency incentive program, and they'll also be able to participate in that new program, the kinship guardianship assistance program. The largest group of kinship kids and kinship families is what's we call informal kinship care. This is where the state hasn't been involved at all. So you're not involved with the child welfare agency, you're not involved with a county court. Basically, the family just determines that this is what's best for the child and make that informal arrangement. And so there's also a huge need for supporting informal kinship caregivers and kinship families. We know that so many grandparents in particular are living on a fixed income and need more support to support kids. So in terms of the American Rescue Plan, so again, I'm like learning in the last couple of weeks because this is a brand new federal relief package. But this will make a really meaningful difference for people. So, it does provide unprecedented resources for kids and families. First, there's the $1,400 stimulus checks. So I've heard some folks who have direct deposit on their tax returns are already getting these stimulus checks. And if you're not someone who has filed a tax return in the last few years, I certainly encourage you to do so, because that's your best bet for accessing a stimulus check. There's also an improvement and an expansion of the child tax credit. So this is increasing from $2,000 to $3,000. And it's even more generous for kids under age 6. So the credit will be $3,600 for children under 6, and it will be fully refundable. So that will make this actually be valuable for families with no income or low income. So this one important thing in terms of the tax credit to know is these are just in place for 1 year. So this is tax year 2021. And I think our goal at Policy Matters is like, we really want to see these extended. We're really happy to see these changes in the stimulus package and really want to see these maintained. So just in Ohio, over 2.3 million children will benefit from the child tax credit expansion. And this is something that is people who are grandparents caring for kids can access this as well. There's also an expansion of the child and dependent care tax credit. So this is something that increases a credit so a household can receive up to $4,000 for one child and up to $8,000 for 2 or more children. And again, it's fully refundable. So families who owe little in taxes can still benefit. And this is a tax credit that can be taken by families with childcare expenses or senior care expenses. So could help get a refund for, say, hiring a nanny or paying for in-home senior care or sending a kid to childcare or summer day camps. So again, this will help leave people better equipped to pay for childcare. Again, these are credits just for tax year 2021. So we really need to make sure that these credits are sustained to make sure we have long-term support for kids and families. There's also in the plan an extension of the unemployment benefits. That's $300 a week through early September. There's also, rental relief and rental assistance, as well as an extension of the maximum SNAP benefit to help people pay for food. And there's also a continuation of what's called pandemic EBT. It's a replacement of school meals. So there's a lot of good stuff for kids and families. All that being said, these investments at the federal level will make a difference, and they're not going to address these long-term inequities in our kinship care system. So, it's temporary and time limited, and we really do need to be advocating for the long-term reforms and long-term changes that we need. So, one of those things that we do need is to really address the GLSEN decision and make sure the state of Ohio is allocating additional resources to kinship families, to kids and kinship caregivers, to make sure that they have that basic security and stability that they deserve. Long-term, again, we know that any child entering the child welfare system has been through trauma, and we know that lawmakers can do something about this. They can help ease the burden for kids. They can help ease the burden for grandparents and kinship caregivers. And so long-term, we want to see state lawmakers and the governor increase the OWF child-only payment, again, to really help meet the needs of kids and families. So we're hoping for an increase to $600 per month per child. This would provide assistance to over 100,000 kids in these informal kinship care settings. So, with that, I know I've been talking for a long time, so I appreciate everyone's attention and interest. If you are interested in learning more, I did a research report on kinship care and foster care and how the state finances and pays for all of this. I'm happy to send or include links in the chat. I also wrote a blog about the new kinship support program. So yeah, happy to share more information. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or also this is my contact info. And again, if you're interested in just following Policy Matters Ohio, we're on Twitter, Facebook. We also have an email list. So yeah, thank you all so much. And I think I will pass Well, I'm going to stop my screen share, and I think I'm passing the mic to Amelia.
Yes, thank you. And while I get my screen up, I guess we'll pause for any questions for Will, if anybody has them, or I don't know if there was any in the chat you wanted to address.
There was none in the chat. No question. No, we're good. You can go ahead and continue.
Okay.
No questions.
Okay.
I was just saying, I think I was on mute, but it looks like there's been a lot of discussion in the chat. I haven't been monitoring it closely, but I'll take a look.
Okay, let me see if I can get my screen to share here. This is always the fun part. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Yeah, okay, great. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for being here today. My name's Amelia Jackson. I already know a lot of you, and I see some new names and faces, so welcome. I'm the Caregiver Program Administrator at the Ohio Department of Aging. I oversee the National Family Caregiver Support Program that I'll give a few more details about in a minute, as well as our Alzheimer's and dementia programs. A little bit about my background. I've been working at the Ohio Department of Aging for about 8 years, and I've always had kind of that passion for helping older adults and caregivers. I started in college when I started working part-time at an assisted living facility in the dietary department, and I got a lot of enjoyment, and I felt good about helping some of those people who needed help, and so I knew I wanted to do something in the aging network. So at the Ohio Department of Aging, we recognize the immense contribution that our caregivers are caring for older adults, people with disabilities, as well as children. And depending on where you are in the state, we know that caregiving looks a lot. It looks very different, and caregivers are different and have many different needs. And so it's our job through our local regional offices, the area agencies on aging, to provide those supports and services to help those caregivers. I also sit on the Ohio Developmental Disabilities Council, as well as the implementation team of OhioCAN, the state's kinship and adoption navigator program. Well, I think you spoke on that a few minutes ago, and I think we talked about that a few webinars maybe ago with this group. I did see a few questions in the chat about it. I guess I can give my little update on it, is that, excuse me, I do know it soft launched, this past fall with half the regions in the state participating, and then fully launched this spring. So the hotline is active and working, but I know they're working on building capacity at the moment. You can't just hire, they were having trouble hiring, so many navigators at once. And of course, with COVID-19 and budget restraints, I mean, that throws a wrench into everything. So working on that, when we last talked to our area agencies on aging, I think 2 weeks ago, I gave an update on OhioCAN, because a lot of them have been very interested in being a part of the advisory councils, helping establish a better referral process between the agencies. And so the Aging Network is ready to stand by and assist and be more involved in that. So we're excited for that. We've been trying to expand in our outreach efforts and supports and services to available caregivers. For example, we've been invited to sit on the Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Steering Committee. And I was talking to someone the other day, and they said, Amelia, why are you sitting on that committee? What does that have to do with older adults and caregivers? And I said, caregiving looks very different. And so we know that there are a lot of kinship caregivers who may be caring for children who may have some of those disorders. And so we need to ensure that those caregivers know where to go for some assistance or help, so they can continue to care for their loved ones. So that's kind of my introduction. And I'd like to also just talk a little bit about next the Ohio Department of Aging. So those who may not be as familiar with the Department of Aging, we're the state unit on aging as designated by the Older Americans Act. The Department of Aging is one of the many state agencies, and we provide support and services for older adults and their families. We're a cabinet level agency, so that means our director is appointed by the governor and advises him on issues related to older Ohioans. We also have an advisory council that helps develop policies and priorities based on needs in the communities. And those representatives are from different sectors and all over the state. And like I said, our programs are delivered by the area agencies on aging who contract with their service providers in their communities. And so we administer these programs through the Older Americans Act. And I know Bill was talking about different funding streams. This is a federal funding stream. So this funding stream does not go through kind of the state budget process, even though we do have other funding streams that do support older adults and caregivers that are affected by the budget. We also administer Medicaid services through the aging waivers. Many of you have probably heard of Passport that are administered by the 12 area agencies on aging. And so with these regional groups, we really form kind of the backbone of the aging network. So a little bit more about our area agencies on aging. Several of them are represented on this committee, and I'm so glad to see them here. I'm glad to see anybody these days, but I'm very glad to see our area agencies on aging. They do such a great job and have shown such resilience in supporting older adults and caregivers of all kinds during this pandemic. It's been really amazing to see. So thank you guys. Little shout out for you guys here. So like I said, so our funding flows from the federal government, the Department of Aging, to these regional offices. And the reason we do that is because these agencies also receive a blend of other federal funds, state funds, local community, maybe levies, and contributions from other organizations in their areas. And so each agency, there's the map there, they serve a unique region of the state. And so that's important when we know that caregivers and older adults have different needs. A caregiver in urban Cleveland might have different needs than perhaps a rural caregiver in Adams County. And so it's up to our area agencies on aging to really understand and have their ear to the ground to understand the needs of the communities. And so one of the programs that is offered at the area agencies on aging, all 12 of them, is the National Family Caregiver Support Program. It's part of the Older Americans Act. And this program, like I said, is funded through, it's a federal funding stream, and it supports family and informal caregivers to their loved ones. So you don't have to, for kinship caregivers, you don't have to be a licensed foster parent or have legal custody. You just have to, be able to, you care for the child when the parent is unable to do so. And so it's a very diverse funding stream in the fact that there's a lot of different things that this support program can pay for and provide, such as care training, resources, information, support groups, respite care. For older adults, we supply adult daycare services. We can also do home delivered meal programs. And so, like I said, each region of the state is different. And we also know that the caregiving journey changes also throughout the lifespan. So for example, we know that, a lot of these caregivers, they might be caring for a child, like a kinship caregiver. And then, they might also be caring though for a spouse or maybe a parent who has dementia or Alzheimer's disease. And so the area agencies on aging and the aging network are there to support those caregivers and really understand the different needs of caregivers. And so actually, recently, I talked to a few of them recently, and we've been talking a bit more about putting more emphasis on kinship caregiving because that's what's needed in their area. And so the AAAs, like I said before, they understand the needs of their region and are able to pivot and support however they're needed. So who's eligible for this program? I've highlighted, this is from the, the statute basically of who's allowed, who can be supported by this program. And it's older relatives who are not the parents, but they're the caregivers, and they have to be 55 or older. And the child has to be under 18 unless they're providing care for an adult with a disability. But I do want to also mention that this is the federal statute, that there used to be, and I think we've talked about this before in this group, a cap on the how much can be spent on caregivers, and so it was a 10% cap. And in the reauthorization of the Older Americans Act last year, they removed that cap. And so the AAAs can now, if they're able to or need to spend a little over that 10% if they see so fit. Of course, the problem with that is we haven't seen a whole huge bump in funding to go along with that from the federal budget. But it is something that just gives a little bit more flexibility to the area agencies on aging to provide those caregivers with that support. So I'd also like to talk a little bit about the CARES Act that was passed last year in response to the, I think I just changed my slide, my apologies there. So in 2020, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, Economic Securities Act, CARES Act, allocated funds to the state to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we've received funding to kind of supplement these existing Older Americans Act programs, including caregiver support. The funding was directly allocated to the AAAs to provide these essential services and supports to older Ohioans and caregivers. And this was done through directly through their staff or through the contracted providers they work with. So this money was very helpful, and a couple of the services I want to talk about included Ohio Staying Safe initiative, which included the distribution of wellness kits. There was a lot of items that were hard to come by this past summer, such as masks and hand sanitizer, soap, and other personal safety items to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So we were able to procure those items and get those out to the people who needed it. Increasing food access through the Staying Healthy initiative. And so what we did is we wanted to kind of spur local investment in the small business restaurants while also meeting the demand for home delivered meals and engaging those kind of local restaurants to help with home delivered meals to those who maybe were in need of food. And then we also were very in tune with technology. I know, especially in rural Ohio, there's a lot of access challenges. And so through the provision of, getting hardware such as tablets to engage virtually in telehealth appointments, health and wellness programs, or caregiver supports like support groups, our AAAs use these funds to help support those. I know some of the AAAs also use the money to buy some, things like hotspots for better Wi-Fi access. And this helped especially for some kinship caregivers as they had children in the home who had to engage in remote learning. And I know that has been a struggle for a lot of kinship caregivers. And then finally, we were also able to focus on the expansion of respite services and to caregivers who saw their duties, kind of expand during the COVID pandemic. And so if you're looking for services or you want to connect with your AAA, you can always go on our website and kind of look at that map again and contact them directly. Or you can call the number here on the screen. And I believe then you just enter your zip code through your touchtone phone and it'll connect you with the area agency that services your region, so you can get in contact with them right away. The second thing I really wanted to talk about today is we have this new strategic plan. And when I say new, I mean it just came out this month. We've been working very hard on it with a lot of our partners. It's the Strategic Action Plan on Aging. It's also known as the SAPA. And so again, it was just finalized, released this month. And it's a prioritized plan to advance elder justice and equity, and achieve optimal health and well-being for older Ohioans and caregivers. And so this document is kind of that prioritized action plan of what we need to do to advance elder justice, equity, and achieve those health goals. So this document was created with input from, the Ohio Department of Aging had a state plan. We had an aging summary assessment, and then the Ohio Department of Health has their plan, the SHIP, the State Health Improvement Plan. And so we kind of put everything together so it can all be in one place. We're all aligned, we're all rowing the same way, to have alignment to better serve older Ohioans and caregivers. And so, Will talked a little bit about this in his presentation too. So very, very appropriate here. To help inform the SAPA, we did a summary assessment to provide a comprehensive picture of the health and well-being of older adults. And when I read this summary report, this piece, this just really stuck out in my mind. If you look here, it describes, a gap of just 100, maybe a little more than 100 miles of 2 counties in Ohio, and the differences in life expectancy. You see in Franklinton, the life expectancy in Franklin County, that's 60 years. Stowe and Summit County is 89.2 years. That's a 29-year gap. And, to me, this just really illustrates the need to address those underlying drivers of health, especially of minority groups. It's just been, it's so important to have this work and this data informing the priorities and policies that we need to do to help older adults and their caregivers. And so I just wanted to share that to show that, we want wherever Ohioans live to live to their full potential. And it's only by, addressing these underlying drivers of health, the isms, ableism, racism, discrimination. We need to just address this. We can't just sweep it under the rug. And so I'm really excited that we are addressing it now and using it in our SAPA and our action plan. So just kind of the overall goal of this SAPA is the living longer, healthier lives with dignity, autonomy, and those disparities and inequities eliminated. The SAPA vision is that Ohio is the best place to age in the nation, meaning to ensure that Ohioans live longer, extending Ohioans' healthy and active years. And so I think this really applies to kinship caregivers, because what we need to ensure that those caregivers are healthy and well and are able to take care of not only themselves, but someone else. And we want them to be able to care for them as long and as best as possible. And so I'm not going to go very deep into the SAPA and its topics. It's a very long document. It's something like 86 pages. So I just wanted to kind of give you the highlights here. There's 6 topics and 15 prioritized issues in the SAPA and SAPA strategies. And this includes caregiver supports. And so additionally, with all these strategies, the SAPA calls attention to those priority populations. You can see them there on the slide: Ohioans of color, rural areas, disabilities, immigrants or refugees, LGBTQ community. Those are kind of our priority populations. And so we'll be using this document to help advocate to organizations both inside and outside the Aging Network to encourage adoption of specific strategies outlined in this SAPA. And so if you look at the red arrow there on your screen, the workforce capacity and caregiver supports is right there under access to care. But a lot of these other pieces apply to kinship caregivers as well. Population health, cardiovascular health, mental health. Under healthy living, we have nutrition and physical activity. Those are all important too, to keeping caregivers healthy and well. And so so here is just kind of a picture of those different strategies, and my last slide, I believe, encourages, or excuse me, has the link, and I encourage you to go take a look at those different strategies. But all these strategies in this huge document are evidence informed, meaning there's either rigorous research that demonstrates that the strategy has had a positive impact on SAPA priorities, or this information was provided by researchers and subject matter experts, and that the strategy is promising. And so what you're seeing here is our issue of improving home care workforce capacity and caregiver supports. And these strategies all align with that. And there's things like, the Family Caregiver Support Program, which I just talked about, the BRI Care Consultation. So a lot of these, that's a program that we're already doing all over Ohio that helps caregivers, especially those who maybe care for someone with dementia or a chronic disease. There's just a lot of good strategies in here that a lot of places are already doing, or they may say, how can I help? What can I do? And so we are now reaching out to those agencies, organizations, partners, to say, well, we think we know what we need to do. Here's some ways we can all work together to help some of these health disparities and improve supports and services for caregivers, and health and wellness of really all older adults in Ohio. So again, this is a brand spanking new document, and I encourage you, to take a look at it. There are some quick guides on there at that link. So instead of having to read the whole 86 pages, there's just a few, couple pager documents to kind of give you a better idea. But I at least wanted to share this with this group so that you guys know kind of where we're headed together to support older Ohioans and their caregivers in the future. So thank you guys so much for your time today, and of course all your efforts to support kinship caregivers all around Ohio. And if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer any of those, especially if you think of something later. There's my email address. Feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to talk sometime. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I looked in the chat and there wasn't any questions, but there was a whole lot of comments. And so I want to encourage comments regarding that you are caregivers, that you are having some type of struggle and those things. So I want to encourage you to get involved with the coalition as care providers. When you get that email, click that link and join us so that we can hear your voice on an ongoing basis, and not just when we're having a specific session going on. That way, I think that the stronger our voices are, the more impactful that we can be as the Ohio Grandparent Kinship Coalitions. Your voices as care providers are so important, and having been a kinship care provider, I understand the struggles, the stress, and the demands that's placed on you as a kinship care provider. So just want to encourage you to reach out and be a part. Are there any comments from the officers, from Ron or Barb or Siobhan? I'm not sure, is Lynn still on the line? Any comments that you want to have to the group before we exit? I want to respect your time.
Just thank you to Will and Amelia. You did a wonderful job. We truly appreciate it.
Yes.
Sure, anytime.
If there aren't any questions, I do want to respect your time and not hold you hostage. Just stay connected. Once you get that email, please continue to get involved. If you have any questions, reach out to us. This recording will be on the website. I'm not sure the time frame, but keep checking because it will be there. And the previous sessions we've had are also on the website. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. And we see you at the next time, at the next session. Thank you.